Hey guys, it's Dan, back with another Doomtown Reloaded video. Election Day Slaughter has been out for a couple of weeks now, or just this week if you were unlucky and had to wait until the actual street date for it. I've been playing around with it for a couple of weeks. No review this week, so what I thought I'd do is take you through the deck I've been running since EDS was released and let you know how I've been doing with it. So I'll get a mat, get the cards, get it all set up, and I'll take you through my thought process for building the deck. Okay then, so Election Day Slaughter's been out in the UK for a couple of weeks and I've had a chance to play around with the cards. You'll recall when I did my review I was very excited about a couple of cards in there, namely Quaterman and Puppet. I set about making a Puppet deck I've been playing for the last couple of weeks, and I decided to run it out of the fourth ring. I could have done Morgan and I could have done Sloane, both easy options for a spell deck. I opted for fourth ring just for the outfit ability. It's very easy to activate. All you have to do is cast a spell when you're not at home and you get a cash and a card. I would argue it's probably the most powerful of the four outfits that you get in the core set, simply because it is so easy to use and it makes money and gets a card. It does a lot of things and it's very easy to activate. It also starts with 19 cash, not 18, so you get a slightly higher starting income as well. So I wanted to build a Smiling Tom deck. I ended up not going with Tom in the end, simply because he is so restricted with his movement. In a mirror match it's not too bad, but without knowing how many fourth ring decks I was going to play, as it happens, I played 5 tournament rounds with this deck over the last couple of weeks, and in 4 of those 5 I played fourth ring. So Tom would have been an absolute blinding choice. Sadly, I changed my mind at the last minute, but that's alright. We did do quite well. We won some, we lost some, and we did okay overall. So I needed a high huckster to be able to use Puppet. I decided to start Ivor Hawley as my main huckster of choice, simply because he's got a high influence, and as soon as you give him a spell it goes up to 4, keeping us in the game early. All the other huckster 2 guys tend to have 2 or less influence. It means you've then got to flesh out your starting guys with more influence and not exactly what you probably want your deck to do. Ivor's very much a glass cannon, eggs in one basket kind of guy. It turns out 3 or 4 turns into the game he's got all of the spells in the world. I think at one point he had 15 hexes stuck to him, which is fantastic. But a bit of a ball ache to move around the table. He's really cool. I like him. He's very expensive at 9 out of your cash, but we've established you do get slightly more with the fourth ring, so we did have 10 to play with once we'd chosen him. And he also gets an extra bullet and an extra huckster rating when he gets a hex, making him huckster 3, so not quite as good as Tom, but useful for pulls for the Puppet nonetheless. Next up, ways of keeping Ivor alive, so I opted for the Brute from Election Day Slaughter, simply because he can soak 4 casualties, and he only costs 2. The Brute was in there when this was Smiling Tom deck, the idea being move the Brute somewhere, Tom follows him. The problem with that, having played around with it, the idea is that I found out that I could move the Brute and he'd be called out, dying very quickly with his 1 draw, meaning Tom gets stuck at home for the rest of the game, and that's not good. At this point I'd spent 11. I was getting wary about how much cash I was spending, so I only have one other starting dude, and that's Travis, simply because the deck is built around Puppet. I want to see it as fast as I can. Very simple. If I don't have Puppet in my opening hand, Travis gets used, I draw 5 more cards, hopefully try and see one. Worked in the games that I used him in, so I can't really argue with that. Looking at this setup now, I would probably add in Smiley, just as another 2-cost guy, simply to get 6 influence in turn 1. Ivor's very susceptible to things like Sun in Your Eyes, or Unprepared when he's got a lot of spells. He can die very easily, which I discovered much to my embarrassment when I was running around terrorising people. I discovered that he wasn't very good in a fight by himself. However, that being said, this is what I settled on the last couple of weeks, and it did do quite well. I start with 6 cash, so it lets me play some higher cost deeds in my deck. So if I draw a 5-cost deed, for example the Morgan Research Institution, which is brilliant with Ivor, especially when he's trying to make grit-based pulls, I can get it out turn 1. So that was my starting setup. You'll notice that 2 of them are abominations. This happened to be a side effect of just my choices. I wanted Ivor to play with because I haven't started Ivor before, and the Brute helps keep him alive. So the abominations help fuel the sub-theme for my deck beyond Puppet, and that was Raising Hell. And we'll come to that when we go through the spells. So that's the starting guys. We'll just put them down there, out of the way. So On to the spells. Well, the first 4 were obviously going to be 4 copies of Puppet. It's downside to Puppet being it's a 4. It can't. Well, it can pull itself against a low grit dude, but if you're gunning for their high value guys, pulling itself is a bit of a problem. It didn't turn out to be too bad for me. I think I failed 1 Puppet pull in all the games I've played by pulling another one of it. It's an easy thing to get around though. You can check your discard pile, see what you've got in play so far, and if you've got 1 Puppet in play and 1 in your bin, there's only 2 left in your deck. It's worth the risk to go for the high grit dude, especially if you know the rest of your deck is going to be stacked highly in your favour. So that's those guys. I went on a bit about these in my previous video. I don't think I need to go on here. Simple effect of basically taking control of a guy until the end of sundown. So it doesn't matter, I've got 3 guys, I'm going to steal yours. So they can go down there so we know what's going on. Right, okay. So, flushing out the deck then, really. It's a hex deck, so we had 2 options. We can go with the low value hexes, play around with things like fetch, ace in the hole. Doesn't really work for Puppet. Puppet's a grit based pull, so we need the highest pull possible. This actually made including my first hex a very easy choice, simply because they're kings. I went for 4 raising hells, and this actually turned out to be a fantastic play. I did have a game where Ivor got aced. He got kidnapped in turn 1. This is a couple of friendly games we had after our actual tournament game, where I had got my ass handed to me, partly because there was a kidnapping. I learnt, having played 3 or 4 games with this, letting Ivor just get in the kidnapping was my best move. Ivor gets kidnapped, I don't put anybody in, I don't even put the brute in, and I play the worst possible hand I can make, high card or pair. I try and just get as rubbish hands possible so Ivor can die, simply because I can then play another huckster, give them a raising hell, and I can bring Ivor back. I don't want him back in my deck, I don't want him discarded from kidnapping, I want him dead, because if he gets discarded, I've got to draw him and then get him back out. So raising hell was a really good choice. It's also fantastic with the brute. Soak 4 casualties. If you're still stuck in the shootout and you're worried about the next round, pop a raising hell, put him back into play. He joins the posse, and he dies again, and again, and again, and again. I think I played the brute 4 times in one game, in one shootout, because I had 3 raising hells. It was a truly fantastic, epic bloodbath. Sadly, having gone through 4 brutes, I'm sure you'll realise I didn't survive the 5th one, and the game was over quite quickly. However, raising hell proved to be a very good card. It's also a very low difficulty as well. It's only hex 8. Which is pretty good. It sadly does mean that Puppet is still a dead card when you pull, because Ivor can only pull it on a 7 with a Puppet, and does need an 8 to get raising hell off. However, at this point we're then looking at other options we've got in the high value hex range. We've established that Puppet is grit based, so we need cards that lower grit. That was a very easy option for me, which is 4 Blood Curse. In essence it says Noon Hex, -2 grit. Softens you up so I can come in with the Puppet and steal you. Can't really argue with that. And as a shootout action, -2 bullets is always good, especially on a 3 or 4 stud guy. There was a game that springs to mind that we played later on where Bobo was running around. Ivor was sat on a Morgan Institute, gave himself Huckster 5, and then Bobo turned up, and that was fun. But yes, Blood Curse, very, very good card for the Puppet deck. Also, other cards very good are Stone Idol. Stone Idol, -3 value. Again, it's low as your grit. Anything that lowered grit pretty much went in the deck. They're unique, and I am running 4 of them simply because of such a huge hit to someone's grit value, -3. I really wanted to see them as early as possible, so yeah, I am running 4. If I built this again, I would probably only run 2. Even the games I played it, I didn't actually use it that often. I was worried I was going to run into Sloanes, Lillians, Stephen Wiles, lots of 14 or higher grit that I was going to need a lot of help to overcome. And so they went in as a 4 of. It's also a good card to give to Travis. Once Travis has used his ability, he's pretty much cannon fodder for the rest of the game, having no influence. You don't really care if he dies, but that's the brute's job. His job is to die, not his. So Travis can have the Stone Idol. He can use it safely from home, because he can target anybody on the table. There's no adjacency or same location required. It just says choose a dude, lower their value. After this, we were looking for maneuverability, which is an obvious choice for hexes, which is Shadow Walk. Shadow Walk's a cracking card. It's got a noon move. It's got a shootout, move into a posse, and an extra action. I have no doubt if you haven't built it, you've been on the receiving end of it. When someone says Shadow Walk Soul Blast, it generally spells the end for somebody. It's normally someone like Phil or Lucy, or unfortunately Ali Hensman tends to be on the receiving end of that quite quickly as well. It's a cracking card, very manoeuvrable, lets you dance around town for a couple of actions while you try and figure out where your opponent is and then come in for the puppet. It's also really good if you're planning on losing low ball, you can dance around, wait for them to boot out, come in for the guy you want next turn who may be booted at the moment, and then your first action next turn can be steal him and use him. At this point I've got Queen, King, 10, 9. Seems a bit daft not to put the jacks in. Yes, they're high value and they make the grip pull for puppet. Other than that, they don't really do much. They're blank guys like Wendy. She's a fantastic target for forget. What I did discover about 3 or 4 games in was you can target Travis with it. It doesn't say an opposing dude. You can target your own dude. The downside to forget as I'm going to cast this to use my ability on my outfit, because it's a 5 and puppet can pull it, it's one of the very few hexes in my deck I know I'm always going to be able to cast regardless of what I pull. So it was always a good trigger for my ability. And then I realised the target has to have an ability. It's not good. They can't have a trait. They can't be Philip Swinford, for example. He's not got an ability. He just says if your opponent reveals a legal hand. He hasn't got that bold text that says do something. On the other hand, Travis does have that text. He has an ability, not a trait. So Travis was a great target for forget, and it was a very, very simple and easy task for me to be able to trigger my outfit from next door, with either having moved off with a Shadow Walk or just walked next door to be able to get my free money and my free card. So forget's very useful. It's also a 0 cost hex, so you can play it out your hand. And don't forget, we're trying to get Ivor a spell as fast as we can to trigger him, get him his influence and his bullet, and make him a bit more survivable. After that, filling it out, I figured I'd just put some paralysis marks on the end just to extend the straight. We've got the straight there, the 9 to the king. Extending it out a little bit further, 6 cards long, just to give some help in the shootout was my idea. And I went for hearts simply because go for the flush as well. And Paralysis Mark is a fantastic spell. It's a brilliant idea. It's just boot you. I'm a big fan of boot effects. Anything that gives me control of the town is always going to be favourable to me as a card being printed. There were originally 4. There's only 3 here now, simply because when I built the deck I was a card over and I had to lose something. I couldn't lose a dude because there are very few of them in the deck. I couldn't lose a deed, again because there are very few of them in the deck. And at that point it's the least useful for the puppet pull, so it had to go. I think in retrospect, if I did this again, I may actually just go to 3 puppets. I've got Travis to go and get them. I probably don't need 4, and I can keep my 4 paralysis marks. That's it. That's the hexes and the stone idols. So it's a very simple heart suite. There's not many options at the moment because we have such a small card pool. So if you're running hexes on high value, that's probably what you're running. And you probably see that in most 4th-ring hex decks at the moment. Okay, moving on, we have actions next. At this point, I was looking for a high value action I could put in my deck that would prove useful. I decided that since Ivor's a stud, I'd go for 4 point blanks. Point blank is a fantastic card. It's simply have a casualty. Basically kill a guy with less bullets than me. And the cool thing about Ivor is he only has 2 bullets, so Travis can't chump it. You have to have less bullets, not equal bullets for point blank, and Travis cannot chump it and be the casualty. In one particular game I managed to point blank Lillian, and that was an absolute awesome move, knocking 5 influence off the table. I think at the end of that particular shootout, it was turn 1, everything had died. The Brute died the turn that I point blank Lillian. The following shootout we drew, Ivor got discarded, Remy got discarded, there was nobody on the table, and at that point my opponent, seeing I had very little cash left, having ganked all my spells and come for him, played 1 deed, no dudes on the table, 1 control point, my opponent won. Very upsetting, but a very cool and tense shootout up until that point. I do like point blank, and I'm going to try and fit it into as many decks as I can going forward, as it's a very good swing for table control. Beyond that, just a couple of extra help out cards really. 2 Hex Slingings, simply because they're jacks, again staying on the high value for pulling for puppet, and also being able to hit my straight on the shootout. Hex Sling is very good. You do have, I mean, Forget, like I said, it's not a crucial card to the deck. It's a very easy target for Hex Slingin to get rid of a Forget. Just dump it off and get 2 hand ranks. Most of the time this deck will straight, it will probably flush. The problem it has is against full house decks, so Hex Slingin help mitigate that. And basically what you're trying to do is stay within 4 casualties of your opponent if you're going to be on the losing side, so you can brute it out. 2 Unprepareds for the mirror match. Unprepared is an absolutely fantastic card to play against hexes. It just shuts them down. If you're on the play on a shootout, first card you play, Unprepared, turns off all the hexes on the opposing dude. If you can pin down the guy with Shadow Walk, if you've got him into the fight and he can't move in with it, then it's a brilliant card. It will turn off absolutely everything. If you can turn off things like Soul Blast and Blood Curse and Raising Hell, if you know they've got abominations in the discard pile, then it's a brilliant card, and it'll actually give you the win against a lot of hex decks. And then after that, staying on the high values, but trying to stay with the straight, I went for 2 magical distractions. If, again, I went back and rebuilt this, I would probably stretch to 3 of these, maybe even 4. They've proved absolutely awesome. If you look at the draw structure in the deck, we have nothing under an 8 apart from the puppets. So we're looking at, on a very small chance of 9, slightly higher chance 10, but for the most part we're looking at Jack or higher, so we're basically going to be turning our hand into a dead man's hand, effectively a rank 11 hand if you cheat. The best thing about magical distraction is people who know it exists are asking me, can I have a look at your discard pile? They'll see 1 and then they'll try not to cheat, and I only have 2 in my deck. I'd probably go to 3 to try and see 1 faster, get 1 in my discard pile faster, to put that fear into people. It's definitely, having played with it, one of the best cheating resolution cards with a high value deck, because you can literally just go, I win, you take 3, 4, 5 casualties. Even against full house decks, you're still going to be destroying them all over the place. So that was the actions. After this I had a look at dudes, starting with 3 guys. I kind of wanted to flesh my deck out. Since we've gone for the sub-theme in the deck of Raising Hell and playing Abominations, that was a very easy choice. It was simply a Ghostly Gun, a Tyx, Smiling Tom, and an Eve Henry. 1 of each Abomination that I'm not starting with. No Bobo, sadly, because he's a 6, and I wanted to keep my low value pulls out of the way, and like I said, when I finished building it I was on 53 cards anyway, and I had to lose a Paralysis Mark. I'd probably try and fit a Bobo in if I could, simply because you're going to have a Huckster 3 running around. It makes Bobo stud 4. But again, all these guys are stud. Dropping them into a fight very, very easily with Raising Hell. A couple of them cost 7. They're a bit harder to play, but Eve and Tyx are very easy to drop in. And again, you can go into a shootout. If Ivor does get booted down by an opposing effect, you can Raising Hell with him, drop in 1 of these guys, and then play your point blank anyway. So it helps back up this point blank play. So yeah, 4 extra studs there, and then just in case it all goes horribly wrong and Ivor does die, or even worse, gets discarded and you can't get him back, a couple of Hucksters, Avie because she's nice and cheap, and Jar because she has an absolutely fantastic ability of simply, again, becoming a stud. So that was it, a couple of extra guys. There aren't many. The original iteration deck I played 2 games with, and I only had 2 Abominations and 1 Avie in the deck, and that wasn't enough guys, so extra dudes had to go in. You don't ever want to play your Abominations, no matter how much cash you get, no matter how dominant you are on the board, and you want to enforce your position by dropping out 2 influence, by say dropping out Tom or the Ghostly Gun or 1 of these guys, especially Avie because she's so cheap for the 2. You don't want to do that, simply because it turns off Raising Hell. You always want to raise your Abominations in. And that doesn't fucking work, because Avie's not a fucking Abomination. And then after that, it's simply a case of putting in a couple of extra Hucksters. If Ivor does get disappeared off the table, you're going to want somebody to play all those spells on, ideally someone to have a Raising Hell and bring him back. So I simply went for a Avie Cline and a Jia Mein. Very simple choices. 2 influence to make up the slack if Ivor is the one that's disappeared. Avie's nice and cheap, she's got 2 upkeep, so is Ivor, so it doesn't make much difference. And Jar just for the extra stud value, reinforcing the point blank. The original build only had one huckster in the deck, and when Ivor disappeared it was very hard to stay in the game because all of a sudden all of this becomes entirely useless. Ivor's actually very resilient, I discovered. You probably don't need the backup guys so much. It's more that if it did go horribly wrong, turn 1 kidnapping, for example, if you get kidnapped on Ivor in turn 1, the best play you've got at that point is to let him die, not get discarded, and then try and play one of your other hucksters out. I think maybe going forward, possibly losing a couple more of these, having established that the straight flush wasn't working for me, I'd put more dudes in, more hucksters, probably a Slade, and maybe even double up on Avie possibly, because she's so cheap and so useful. After that, we have the deeds, the end of the deck build, and this was a very simple process for me. This was literally just a case of a king, a queen, a jack, a 10, a 9, and an 8, just to fill out what I'd already got in the deck. I went for the railroad for the extra movement, to be able to move around town, the general store to be able to lower the cost of my hexes, the Jackson Strike because it's a very cost efficient way of getting some income and it's out of town, the Union Casino simply because it's 3 income, and it's a high value card I can play out very early because I had the 6 cash, only 6 if I lost low ball, 7 if I didn't, so I had the chance to play that and a couple of spells. The Morgan Institute was a very good play in the end. It's got the 3 cash, helps out with Ivor, boosts up the puppet pull, and then the Circle M branch because yes, it's another 8. I probably could have gone higher, but simply put, hex decks are efficient at playing cards, and that lets me draw another one. So few ways in the game to draw cards. The Circle M branch is almost a must play in any deck that's looking to play 2 or 3 cards a turn to help refill. And also, it's not too bad. It costs you 3 and it makes you 2. A lot of the 2 production deeds don't really fit into that very nice cheap option. You'll notice these guys here, the 2 cost ones, generally produce 2, and you're looking to pay 4 to be able to get you 2 production there. But that's the deck. It did very well overall. I think I lost 2 of the 5 games that it played. Some very close, tense games. I was scuppered in a lot. The puppet idea fell apart in the very first game I played, and it was one that started Lillian Morgan and Remy Lapointe. 2 very extremely high grit guys. I had to work very hard to puppet. Eventually I just gave up and decided to get involved in a shootout instead, hoping they wouldn't be able to shoot as well as I could, trying to turn off different abilities and boot people down. Unprepared on Remy, for example, so he couldn't use his ability. It was a very close game. Sadly, I did mention earlier, it came down to no dudes left and control points turning up on the board. If I had more dudes, I think I'd have been in a much better position for that one. Other than that, the mirror match it's just a chess game, very much so, with 4 shadow walks on each side, especially if they're running puppet as well and not soul blast. It's literally who can get to town square and sit on it first. First person that gives and moves out to go and get more spells tends to be the guy that loses. My patience isn't what it used to be for sitting around and waiting, and I did disappear out of town square in the mirror match in one game, and it did cost me the game in the end as my opponent took control of town square and was taking my brute every possible turn. I played an Avie, she disappeared, and yeah, it's a fun deck to play. I'm not concerned about puppet being powerful. I know a lot of older Doomtown players from Classic were wondering why it was reprinted. I don't see it being a problem at all. It's a fun card. It's definitely a fun deck to play, and if you can get the lock in, if you can grab somebody and then position them well so you can take them next turn as your first play, if you can win low ball and sit the guy where the puppet is, your first play next turn is going to be take control of him again. The massive plan for the deck was originally start a few guys, steal your guy, and then try and start shootouts with your guy and just play the worst hand possible and get your guy dead. It turned out the best way to use puppet, because you get control until the end of sundown, is take their guy and try and win. Just take the influence off them. It's a very good option for it as well. But that's the deck. That's what I've been playing. There are a couple of tweaks and changes I'd possibly make, but again, with such a small card pool at the moment, we're only 3 packs in, your options are a little bit limited for hexes. I mean, it's a problem in the sense that we're not seeing a lot of variety with hex decks. There's not very much you can do. I'd like to see a low value hex deck running around, but I think you can run Ace in the Hole, Fetch and Summoning, or you can run Shadow Walk, Blood Curse and Raising Hell. the choice isn't really a difficult one there. You definitely want the higher value hexes simply because they've got way more utility. I think once we get more abominations, the summoning deck potentially sees some play and some legs, and also the more packs that come out, the more hexes we get, the more variety we do see, and hopefully there'll be a move away from the simple Blood Curse, Paralysis Mark, Shadow Walk decks, but we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. It's basically a look at how I built the deck. Very little change. That was pretty much the process I went through when I built it. This is obviously the final result, and there were minor tweaks. Like I say, it started out as a Smiling Tom deck and turned into Ivor Hawley. A couple of cards got taken out because we were over on numbers. I put a couple of jokers in, possibly. It's a pull deck. There's no real reason not to. I'm losing my enthusiasm and my love of jokers at the moment because they always turn up in low ball or in my draw hand. I did actually put 2 in for a tournament in Manchester last week, and in my second game I sat down and my opening hand was a joker and a load of rubbish. So I put Travis to work trying to get myself a puppet and promptly drew 2 jokers. So they've come out. I'm not a fan of them anymore, and I'm sure I'll come back to them one day, but at the moment they're getting in the way, and I think they're causing more harm than good. I think in some decks, maybe gadgets jokers will definitely be more useful. Gadgets tend to be more difficult to create, so you want a more flexible pull structure to your deck. But in this, I've taken them out. I don't think it will really hurt me too much. Having 2 less cards that I can choose the value for. It's not a very good shooter deck. I don't think it needs the jokers to be able to force its hand and get what it needs to. But there we go, the 4th ring puppet deck. I don't think it's as strong as Soul Blast deck. I think Shadow Walk Soul Blast is still the best play out of hexes at the moment, but the puppet definitely cause for concern for your opponent, and it is very difficult to play around. You can't just run Avie into the town square you're playing Sloan, especially if there's a puppet that's hanging around. Even more so if she boots to use her ability. Avie boots to gain a control point. There's nothing she can do at that point about somebody turning up with a puppet and taking her. You're basically giving somebody a dude and a control point until the end of the turn. That's not something you want to be doing. And there you have it, the 4th ring deck I've been running for the last 2 weeks. It's a lot of fun to play. It's nothing special about it. There's a few different tricks that you would normally see in a hex deck. For example, the puppet rather than Soul Blast, and playing around there with Raising Hell and the Abominations, which I very much enjoyed, and I might revisit that at some point as an actual deck build. Rather than the shenanigans of things like Soul Blast and puppets. I'm actually dedicated for Abominations. We might not have enough at the moment. Hopefully, as packs come out, we might see some more, and I'll make that a very tasty option for the 4th ring to maybe move not so heavily on hexes, but the actual dudes in their deck as well. Next up, I'm going to be doing Quarterman deck. I shall be running that at the Huddersfield event on the 28th. That's 2 weeks from now. Before that, I sadly can't make the event this weekend, but there is a tournament in Worcester. In fact, there are 2 events in Worcester. There's a deputy event for the kit I showed you guys last week, for the Jackson Strike mat and badge and the Sloan boxes, and then after that Andy's got himself an OP kit 1, and he's going to be running a multiplayer elimination game and then distributing prizes after that. And I'm really gutted I can't be there, because this sounds like it's absolute blast and awesome fun to play. It's going to be no holds barred multiplayer, all in the town brawl, with whoever who doesn't have enough control points to remain in the game gets eliminated every sundown until there's one clear winner. And it does look a lot of fun, so you're absolutely gutted I can't be there. But if you do get a chance to go, I strongly recommend it. And he's a fantastic guy, brilliant tournament organiser, and the events I've been to that are his have been a lot of fun. So hopefully you can make it down there. And that's it for this one. I will attempt to get the Quarterman deck up and running, probably with a video after the Huddersfield event, so I get a lot more games in with it. Alternatively, I've also got my Octagon up and running now with Doomtown, so if you fancy a game on there, by all means give me a shout. You can find me on the Facebook pages, drop something in the comments below, or even friend me on Octagon, and all these places I am WizWang, and I'm sure you'll be able to find me quite easily. So until next time, have fun, and if you fancy giving the 4th ring a go, try the puppet deck. It's a lot of fun.